Hi, I'm Anne Marie, and every Wednesday, the third Wednesday of the month, I have Annie's Angels. And today, my angel is Mercedes Kirkel. She is an award winning author and channel for Mary Magdalene and other beings of light. Her passion is to help people connect with higher guidance and grow spiritually. Would you like to receive guidance from Mary Magdalene, Mother Mary, Isis, or Archangel Michael? And do you want to live your life purpose and remove obstacles that are holding you back? Would you like to experience the Christ Magdalene love? Well, today we are blessed to be able to have Mercedes Kirkel. And hello, Mercedes, how are you?
Well, and thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to start with the obvious, and I don't know about you, but when I was little growing up in Chicago, our favorite game to play when we were little was nun. And all my friends were Catholic, and they would all have nuns for teachers, and so we would go down in the basement and we would play the nun, and then they would show us they would bring out their Catholic school things and their teachings and stuff and show us how to be able to tune in to the Catholic way. But are you raised Catholic, or have you been, when did you tune in to Magdalene?
I really didn't tune into her until she contacted me and started channeling through me. I was not raised a Christian. My family was Jewish, but very marginally even, religious at all. So I didn't grow up with any teaching or awareness around Mary Magdalene. And it wasn't until a friend actually gave me a book that was channeled material about Mary Magdalene that she really came across my radar at all. And at that time, I remembered, by the end of the book, I remembered past lifetime of having been with her. And this was when she was incarnated with Yeshua. But that was way down the road. And
I'm going to stop you right there, baby girl. What is Yeshua? What is Yeshua to those of us that don't know these terms?
Yes. Yeshua is the Aramaic name for Jesus. And Aramaic is what they spoke at the time that Jesus and Mary Magdalene were incarnated. And so in her channeling to me, Mary Magdalene always refers to him as Yeshua. So that's what I have gotten used to, and that's what I call him now too.
I was watching one of your classes, and it described the process of channeling Magdalene. I call it the Magdalene dimension, but you have other terms for it. And would you describe to me, what is the difference between masculine and feminine dynamics?
I love that question because I think it's so important. And it can be seen in many different ways. But the way that I hold it, and this is through also the teaching that Mary Magdalene's given me, is that it's a very large principle. It's really a whole way of relating to life, to reality, and to the divine. And the simplest way, I think, to hold it is the concept of Jinyang, because many people are familiar with that. And Yin-yang kind of takes the charge out of what many of us have in our relationship to masculine and feminine. It's just two qualities that make up the whole, and that no matter what you're focusing on, it always contains both of these qualities, the yin and the yang, in different ways. So masculine and feminine is like that, and it starts with Mother, Father, God, that she says those are two different faces of the divine being. There's the mother face and the father face. And I like to explain it starting with the masculine, that the masculine, Father God or divine masculine, you could call it, in its purest form, it's what I call the transcendental being. Another name for it is pure consciousness. And if people don't know what I'm talking about, if that doesn't, connect for people, one way of understanding that is it's the state that most people are trying to attain when they meditate. That state of quiet, peace, what's beyond all that's appearing here now. What transcends it, the transcendental being, transcendental state. That's the pure masculine. But it also has more step down, you might say, forms as we experience it in this realm, where it goes from consciousness into the mind, into thinking and our brain, and then all the qualities that the masculine animates, the masculine part of ourselves, whether we're gender-wise, female, male, or whatever combination along that spectrum. We all have our masculine and our feminine. So we all have our minds, our ability to contact our minds, that's part of our masculine. Part of our masculine is our will. The masculine is very much about having goals and attaining goals, going for a purpose, that kind of thing is very much the masculine orientation. The feminine, and going back to all the way up to Mother God, the feminine aspect, is God in manifestation. So this has to do with creation. It has to do with form. You could say matter is, it has the ma in it, the mother, the feminine divine, that the parts of ourselves that are our feminine parts are our physical, including our bodies, our energy, our emotions, our sexuality. I laugh at this point because I usually say these are all the parts that most of us have a hard time with.
Well, no, I'm surprised because the testosterone is always related to the sexuality. And I am surprised to hear that that is the femininity, because it seems a lot of times when the testosterone level of women leaves in menopause and things, so does the sexuality part. But this is completely spiritual, it sounds like.
It's spiritual, but it also informs every aspect of our being. So it's very practical in a certain way, too. And in sexuality, there's a masculine orientation to sexuality and a feminine orientation to sexuality. The masculine orientation is very goal-oriented. And,
Okay.
There's, something we're going for here, orgasm and all of that. The feminine is very much about resting, experiencing in the energy. It's the difference between being and doing. And so, in practical terms, the feminine is much more about connection and about the closeness, the experience, the intimacy. The masculine is more about the goal. And there's a play where both are involved, and a dance, and it's both internal, we have both those parts ourselves, and then with a partner, we'll be animating different aspects of this in relationship with a partner.
I see. So when we merge them, as I saw in your class, you were teaching the process of merging and becoming one with your heart. Can you explain the heart, where that comes in?
Well, the heart is the seat of the divine feminine in our physical being and our energy being also. Whereas third eye is the seat of the divine masculine. And so one of the things that Mary has talked about is that at this time, what's really being called for is this uniting of the feminine and the masculine. And most of us are out of balance with our feminine and masculine because of our culture, because of our upbringing, all sorts of things. So most of us are underdeveloped in our feminine and overdeveloped, you could say, in terms of balance in our masculine. But she says it's not like we have to bring our masculine down. We have to bring our feminine up to meet the masculine so that they're in
Right.
balance. And that has to do with living in the heart, that when our feminine is strong, we'll be able to live in our heart, just like most of us right now are very comfortable living in our mind.
Okay.
And so most people who are attracted to spirituality have some experience of being in their heart. That's part of what attracts us to spirituality. And we have different experiences that you could say are glimpses, and they last different amounts of time, but for most of us, they're temporary. And what she's talking about is strengthening our feminine so that we can be continuously in our heart, which most people have an attraction to from those experiences, because in general, those experiences are very wonderful. And so what Mary Magdalene is offering is very practical teachings on how we can do that, what we need to do to strengthen our feminine and live in our heart.
I noticed that in your description, you said Isis as well. Where does the union between Magdalene and Isis comes in?
Well, as I know it, and as she has spoken about with me, she was a priestess of Isis, and that she was part of the Isis lineage. She was a high priestess of Isis. And I believe that's part of where the what was, the way she was portrayed for so long as a prostitute, which was never part of the Bible or anything like that. But oftentimes priestesses or those involved with the goddess temples were called prostitutes. And part of it was because
Really?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And it was part of, especially when the patriarchy was trying to take over and take the power away from the matriarchy and from the goddess-oriented temples. It was a way of, diminishing the temple and the priestesses associated with them because they had a lot of power and popularity. People were very, loved these temples and these practices. So they were trying to take the power away. So by calling them prostitutes, that was one way of doing it.
Interesting. So so the reason that you mention Isis is because Magdalene was, I don't want to say a priestess of Isis then.
She was, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
So tell us then where despair comes in. Why do so many of us, one of the things on your videos you spoke of, or your class spoke about how the different dynamics where we may want to channel the dynamics of the Magdalene and how that can help us in our life. Can you give us an example?
Well, there's a lot there.
One of the things, I guess what I'm saying is the victim. What do we do when we want to channel our strengths and merge into the heart to be able to, as you were telling one woman on one of the classes, she was saying that she loved her horse, but she had become afraid of the horse because she got in an accident with it or something like that. So she wanted you to show her how she could learn to trust her horse again. So I guess that's a despair to me because I love animals, but how, I guess we can also say that can happen in relationships. How do you learn to trust? How do you learn to be able to get past all those things and use your ability that you teach?
Fundamentally, what Mary Magdalene is teaching about is completing the work of the third dimension and moving into the next dimension. That's our spiritual growth, our evolution. That's where we're all headed.
What is the
And
first dimension?
third dimension.
What is the first dimension?
Well, the first dimension is the elemental world. You know,
Which explain?
like the mineral world, the minerals. You know, the earth and the
Physical?
elements of the physical. You could say that, yes, the physical.
And the second dimension?
The second dimension is plants and animals. So the beginning of, you know, this, you could call it sentient life, but I think even minerals are alive and all of that. So however you want to describe it. And the third dimension is where most of us are, and what we call reality, what we're familiar with, this dimension here. And there are different aspects of the third dimension, but in the third dimension, each dimension has a different learning that our soul is learning about, and a very big process of learning. And in the third dimension, it has a great deal to do with power, and that's the arena that we're learning about in many, many different ways. One aspect of power at the third dimension is that power from the third dimensional perspective seems to be out there, like other things have power over us. So, you know, we are in a relationship and then the other person does something and we suffer because of that. That's when your power is outside, where you don't have any control over it. Somebody's doing something and you're the recipient. You could say the victim. You're not in charge of that. You're not in control of that. That's a very third dimensional orientation. And in the third dimension, that's what seems to be going on all the time. You know, that we have this world that's constantly affecting us and we're at the effect of it. What Mary is fundamentally teaching about is a huge shift where we start to realize that our well-being, our wholeness, all the things that we desire fundamentally are not something we get from out there, from our experiences or our relationships or other people, that fundamentally it's something we source from God. And that we can source it internally, that we have a part of our being is what she calls our inner divinity. And we can source that directly. And if we're not experiencing that, so, you know, for example, with this woman, the part that she was cut off from was trust. She had lost trust in a certain way because of the experiences she'd had. Well, Mary Magdalene says it's not because of the experience that she lost trust, but the experience did affect her. She's not immune either. That what happened is the experience shocked her. And in that shock, she disconnected from her own inner connection to Source. And so that the path to coming back to her wellness, her wholeness, and that particular way of trust is not through trying to fix the outer world somehow or change the outer world. It's through reconnecting with that part of her divinity that...
Okay. We're starting to get abstract here. I want to understand this. The woman had an accident with her horse. She needed to learn to trust. So she needed to get in touch with Source. Describe what Source is to you. Magdalene, God, what is it?
First of all, she didn't need to learn to trust. She already is trust. She already is. Her trust exists ultimately in your relationship with the divine, however you experience that.
So the divine is the source.
That could be Source, that could be God, that could be wellness, wholeness, oneness, however each individual experiences that. Yes.
Okay, so she needed to realize that what she didn't trust was not really the horse.
Right.
What she didn't trust was
that within her is this well of trust that she knows because of her divinity. Trust is an aspect of divinity. When we're connected to the divine, we are in trust. It lives in us, as us, through us. But in the shock of this experience that she had, she got disconnected from her inner connection to
So
the
she didn't
divine
trust
in that
anymore.
form. So she
She
lost her
lost her
connection to
connection with
trust.
the trust.
Yes. So it's
And
about
how did
reconnecting to trust.
and how
And
did you
then, go
mm,
ahead.
yeah, so let's say the average person is in a trust situation. We all are at some point, whether it be learning to trust a relationship or a friend or ourselves, um, or drug addiction or whatever. What is it then if we do not or have been whacked out of being able to connect with our trust, then what is the next step for us to get that back?
Well, I follow, and this is Mary's teaching. Mary's teaching is to follow the pathway of emotion. And emotions, our emotions that come up are, including our painful emotions, are our guides to where we've gotten disconnected and how to reconnect. So in this case, her emotion, if I'm remembering correctly, was probably fear. That she had fear now in this situation relative to horses. So what Mary says is the first step is to connect with the emotion, which most of us have developed a lot of patterns of disconnecting from our feelings and our emotions. And we tend to go into our head and have a million thoughts going on in our head, which is a cover-up for our emotions, because most of us have learned that emotions aren't safe. Emotions are going to bring you pain, and you're going to get stuck in the pain. You're never going to get out of it. You might even die. You might just get sunk and never, at the least you might get dysfunctional, not be able to function. That's what most of us have learned. So we're very guarded against our emotions in general, especially in this country. Some cultures aren't so guarded, but in this country, most of us have really gotten that indoctrination. So the first thing is to even recognize that you're having an emotion. And then what Mary says is to open to it, to merge with it, which is a very feminine response. The masculine response is to want to fix it right away. Figure out what's the problem and go fix it. But the feminine response that she's teaching is to open to it and allow yourself to merge with it.
So kind of like giving your shadow child a hug.
Mm-hmm. As if that's how you relate to emotions.
Learning how to, instead of seeing the pain or the fear or the trauma as something that is constantly tugging and tugging and tugging at your hem, rather than saying go away, go away, go away, learning to give it a hug, so to say, merging with it.
Rather than it being the enemy, realizing it's trying to help you to heal and to grow. And it's your guide. And so really turning to it to receive the gift that it wants to give you. Very different than what most of us have learned. So when we do that, when we merge with the feeling, then we can invite it to guide us to which aspect of our divinity it's pointing us to that we've gotten disconnected from. And in this woman's case, it was trust, but there are many different aspects, and that's part of what we learn as we learn this teaching of Mary's. But in this case, it was trust. And in guiding this woman to which aspect of her divinity she had disconnected from, suddenly she was there. And she was, by having that awareness, she was reconnecting with it, simply by bringing her consciousness and her open feeling to it. She was reconnecting with it. And then there are further steps you can take to really invite yourself to once again connect with the fullness of what it is to have that, what it is to have trust. But it requires that first process of going through feeling. That opens the doorway of the heart. And then there's able to be that reconnection. And when I work with people, what I always ask them is after they've done that, I said, what are you experiencing now? Whereas before, in particular, this woman's case, she was experiencing fear when she thought about horses and her experience with the horse. I say, what are you feeling now? And the number one thing I hear from people is peace, that they come to peace. And then I often hear things about, softness, warmth, very nurturing feelings. And that's how I know that they've made that reconnection, because there's a huge shift. And then I ask them to bring back in that situation. So in her case, I would ask her, from this new place of now being reconnected, bring back in your relationship with horses and the event that happened with the horse, and hold both of those, your connection to trust, now reconnected, and the event with the horse. And they'll have a very different experience, and they'll say, they have this freedom now, and they'll say, yes, I feel very differently. And then I ask, are there any actions now that you want to take from this place? Sometimes there are, sometimes there aren't. Sometimes the reconnection was the action that was needed. But sometimes there's more things. Oh, yes, I'd like to go back and experience being with horses again in a very, this is an example, with this new reconnection, and see how that is. So it'll come first full circle back into the outer world, back into the events, but from this new place where now you're not cut off, you're not deficient and looking out there for what's going to, fix you. Suddenly you're whole again. You're reconnected to your divinity, and you're bringing that back into your world and your experience with you.
So is what you teach most of all in classes that you give, workshops that you give, this process?
This is a huge part of what I teach. Mary has said that doing this would do more to transform people and help people to complete the work of the third dimension and start to be ready for uniting with the masculine and moving into the fourth dimension than any other process.
The fourth dimension is?
The fourth dimension is where we're headed. That's the energy dimension. And it's where we're opening to our energy bodies, the astral. And many people have experiences of the fourth dimension already. For many people, it's what you experience when you dream, what the world is like in dreams. Some people have meditation experiences, or mystical, what's called mystical experiences, shamanic experiences, drug experiences, out-of-body, near-death experiences. For the most part, those are all examples of going into a fourth dimensional reality, what many people call woo-woo.
Oh, I've never heard that term.
Oh, you never heard woo?
No. No, I've never heard that term. I've heard of other things, believe me, girl, that have been just as woo-woo.
Yeah.
So one of the things I wanted to ask you about is, when people wake up in the morning, sometimes they each have their own way of tuning into the divine. Some will call it devotion. Others will call it meditation. Is it all one and the same?
Well, I believe that tuning into the divine is universal, and that there are many forms of doing that. So there's just different processes, different ways that people can do that.
But what I'm saying is, There's different ways, but we're all reaching that connection to the heart, correct? The heart and our God energy.
Yes, I would assume so.
No, come on. I feel you're
Well,
pacifying me right here. Okay, go ahead.
no,
What
no.
is it?
You know,
No,
I can't know exactly what people are doing because you were
no.
talking about, what people, we're generalizing. But yes,
Yeah,
I think,
no.
all those different forms are ways of reaching out for the divine.
Because
And I think that,
so many religious people will say, well, certainly I don't believe that your mystical stuff, it cannot be what I have, which is, each one is pitted against the other in so many ways in this world that oftentimes it begins to be, it misses the mark, it misses the point that
well, I
everyone
think
is reaching out to a higher source.
I think this is one of the differences between religion and spirituality. That
Okay, there we go.
that religion tends to be looking at one particular form, one particular, you know, body of ways that
Whichever religion
people,
that is.
yes, that people can use to connect with and grow in their relationship with the divine.
Mhm.
But it's religion because it's formulated, it's fixed, it's only these ways and nothing outside these
There are
ways. So,
rules. There are
mhm.
rules.
And we get into everything else is not, the way. This is the
Hmm.
way. So that's the challenge, and in some ways, from my point of view, the problem with religion. Religion can support people in connecting with the divine. It can be helpful, but it also can be very focused on, the power struggle with everybody who's not part of that religion, making them wrong and all of that. And that's all part of the third dimension that we're growing in and learning about. But to me, spirituality transcends that. Spirituality is just the process, however we engage it, that is connecting us with the divine. So spirituality can include religion. It can exist outside of religion. It's a very personal, and even beyond personal, it's always changing, even for the individual, what form that might take.
That's true. Tell me what one of your private sessions is like. What could someone expect if they were going to one of your private sessions?
Okay, well, I work a few different ways. One of the ways is I do channeling with people, where I have 5 guides that I personally channel: Mary Magdalene, Yeshua, Mother Mary, Isis, and Archangel Michael. So when I do channeling, I'm channeling one of those guides, and I do that as a package where they have one session where it's just purely channeled, and then there's a follow-up session, usually a week after, which is a coaching session with me, which the guides asked me to do because they realized that people weren't getting the full benefit from the channeling. They weren't understanding everything that was coming through. So they asked me to have a follow-up session that's a coaching session where I'm helping people with anything that either they want to go into more deeply, or they didn't understand, or even sometimes they might have been troubled by something that came through in the channeling, and then I can help them to understand it and work with it. So that's one of the things. And even in the channeling, sometimes the guides will say, ask Mercedes about this. There are certain things that they don't really want to deal with, and they
Right.
sort of
What?
delegate it to me.
Okay.
So we
Okay.
work together as a team in that way.
All right.
So that's a channeled reading. Then I do also work with people that is pure coaching alone. And oftentimes what I'm doing is helping them with this Magdalene, what I call the Magdalene Heart Path process, what we were just talking about and demonstrating with this incident with the woman with the horse and the trust, reconnecting with trust. So I oftentimes work with people where they have challenges in their life and they're wanting help with it. And people have found that to be very effective. And the other way that I help people in private sessions is I will do spiritual mentoring, which is if people want practices or help with practices that they're engaging for their ongoing spiritual practice and spiritual growth. And I do more teaching work then, where I'm teaching them techniques and processes that can help them. And that's kind of an extension of what I do. I also offer classes, mostly online, where I do teaching work to help people learn how to do these processes themselves, the Magdalene Heart Path process. And then there's, I do a year-long program where I help people to awaken their light body, activate all the different processes of their light body, and begin to access the fourth dimension and manifest in the fourth dimensional way. So that's another course that I offer, a program.
I wanted to have you give me an example of what you do, if that's all right.
Mm-hmm. What are you thinking?
So I'm thinking for myself and my body image.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say that many of us women suffer terribly about our body image, and that whether we're too fat or whether we're aging or whether we are, the things that often happen in a society where we are plastered with gorgeous people all over, and then find ourselves comparing ourselves to the woman in the mirror. Mm-hmm. How would you direct me to honoring the image I see in the mirror?
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. I love that. And I agree. Many people struggle with this. So what I'd like to begin with is tuning into the feelings, the emotions. So when you look at yourself in the mirror, what are the feelings that come up for you?
I would immediately see large hips. Mm-hmm. And I would see myself comparing myself to my image of when I was 19 and 20 at 115. I would see myself as with the critical eye of whether my skin was as smooth as it used to be. I would see myself wondering if I was 2 weeks ago 1 pound slimmer than I am today, or if I'm 1 pound heavier, or maybe 5 pounds heavier. This constant.
So these are all the kind of thoughts that we tend to have, and feeling is underneath that. So if you set those thoughts aside, that might help you connect with the feeling. And I'm going to guess a few, and you just tell me yes or no. You don't have to explain or anything. I'm wondering if one of the feelings might be worried.
Certainly.
Okay. Frustrated?
Definitely.
And I'm wondering if ashamed is in there.
I don't know. Ashamed.
Okay,
maybe
so
ashamed.
That may not be part of it for you.
Well, I think only ashamed that perhaps I'm not trying harder to exercise 100 hours a day on things like that. But
that's sort of a different issue.
Yeah.
But relative to like just seeing your body, and that just sounds like a no. That's not part of what comes up for you. So it's more about worried and frustrated. That's what I heard. Mm-hmm. Any others that you can connect with that are feelings that come up?
Insecurity.
Ah, yes, insecure.
Okay. Constantly, even going to the grocery store, finding myself comparing constantly.
The strongest one is that feeling of I feel insecure when I see myself in the mirror. Yeah.
And not wanting to look too long, because knowing that the longer I look, the more I'm going to find wrong. So,
So
yeah. Okay.
this is kind of a fix-it strategy. Okay, I'm going to fix that insecurity. Just don't look too long. So that's
Mm.
part of your masculine trying to help you. But for right now, we want to support the feminine. So we're going to set that fix-it aside for right now and just stay with that feeling. So let's work with insecurity. That sounded like the really strongest one to me. Would you agree?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what I want to ask you to do is to really feel that feeling, sense where it lives in your body, and then open to it. Let yourself really be with the feeling rather than trying to jump out or get away from it. Open to that feeling of insecurity that comes up when you see yourself in the mirror.
I don't want to do it too much or I'll start bawling online.
Which is part of the healing. I can understand not wanting to do that online. I'm imagining you feel reluctant because of your need for dignity.
Yeah, yes. But
And I can understand. But in a private session or perhaps by yourself later, I highly recommend that because that's part of the healing. Is mourning. Many of us have grief around these things that we haven't allowed, that we've, staved off for so long, and there's a well of grief there. And if that comes up, I really encourage people to allow it as much as they're able because that's where healing comes from, is by letting it out. And actually where we get stuck is by holding it in. That's where our energy gets stuck and our growth gets stuck. But let's go to the next part now, which is to, from this place of connecting with the insecurity, invite it to guide you to the place in you that it's pointing you to, that you've gotten disconnected from, some beautiful part of yourself that insecurity is saying you've lost touch with in this circumstance of what comes up when you see yourself in the mirror. And I'm going to make some guesses here because I am imagining you're not so familiar with this process. I'm wondering if that insecurity is pointing to a longing in you for acceptance, the acceptance of being good enough.
I'm sure, yeah, definitely acceptance.
Yes. And also, another one that I'm guessing is seeing yourself as beautiful.
I grew up in a family where that was very important. Beautiful
So that
mother that always wanted that.
So I'm wondering, is that a part of it for you, of wanting to, the way you are now, seeing this as beautiful?
Wanting it.
Yes. So that's what I'm guessing, and tell me if this feels accurate to you, because you're the authority, not me, on what's true for you. Would you say that this insecurity is pointing to a longing for acceptance, that you're good enough the way you are, and for being seen even by yourself as beautiful?
Oh, absolutely.
Great. And to me, those are parts of your divine nature, that in our connection with the divine, that's where complete acceptance lives, as well as seeing something as beautiful. That's part of, through our connection with the divine. So now I'm going to ask you a next step, which is to see if you can go inside and find the place in you that knows what it would be like to have that full acceptance of being just the way you are, fully accepted, and being seen as beautiful. And let yourself merge with that place that knows what it would be like to have that. And just notice what you experience when you do that.
Yep.
What did you
I would.
experience?
I saw myself giving myself a hug. I saw myself accepting me the way I admire other women.
Yes. So now, staying connected to this place you just contacted within yourself, as much as you're able, bring back in the situation of looking at yourself in the mirror and see if you can hold both and what it's like now from this place.
I think that helps. I think now it seems silly to see myself the other way.
Yeah. So what you've done is you've shifted from your wholeness is going to come from some outside thing of having some kind of beauty that you don't have right now to connecting with those pure qualities and bringing that, your wholeness, your fullness of that into your relationship with your physical appearance. And it doesn't mean that you wouldn't choose to make changes. You might choose
Right.
to make changes, but you'll do it on the basis of your already being whole, already being at peace, not seeking that through those changes.
Right. Yeah. Well, I can see how the procedure works, and I think it would be much nicer when a person could bawl their eyes out.
Yep, it helps.
I don't want to bawl my eyes out on the camera right now, but
Well, I give you full permission after you're off the air to do that.
so anybody that wants to go to Mercedes Kirkel and bawl their eyes out and find acceptance of their situation, I definitely encourage you. I've got mascara in my eyeballs now. um, Mercedes, tell me about the difference between your books. You have Mary Magdalene Beckons, Join the River of Love. What is that one?
That was her first book that she brought through, her first teaching, and that's mostly about this emotional healing work and using emotions like we just demonstrated to reconnect with our divinity. She did that first because she felt like it was the most important area. But she said there's two other areas that are also very important. One is our relationship to sexuality, and one is our relationship to our body. So that's why I
And
love
that's
that.
your second book. Your second book is Sublime Union, a woman's sexual odyssey guided by Mary Magdalene.
Yes.
And tell me about that one.
That was her giving her teaching and instruction on sacred sexuality. But also, she was very strong on wanting me to tell my story of engaging these practices with my partner as the help that people really needed, because she said there already are teachings available to people on sacred sexuality. There's books and all sorts of workshops, all sorts of things. She said that's not what's lacking. what people are lacking is, yeah, but how do I integrate this in my life? What does it look like when a normal person does this in the world, and
Mm-hmm.
what happens?
Mm-hmm.
And she was very strong about, she wanted me to tell my story to give people a glimpse of, one person's version of what this looks like in life.
And tell me a little bit about that story.
Well, it was with a partner who was brought to me in a very magical way. And we were in relationship for 1 year, and that was exactly how long it took for her to channel this whole process and go through this. And I felt like he was the perfect person to go through this with. And interestingly, he did not have a background in sacred sexuality, and I did. So that was another perfect part of it, was that you got to kind of see it from two sides, of someone who was brand new to it and someone who was very experienced, and how we both responded and learned and grew. And so it's the book is a combination of our sexual experiences and also our emotional experiences. Definitely, I'm using her practice with emotions throughout this and bringing that to it. And I don't want to give away the story.
Ruin the book by giving away.
Yeah, but I've heard people tell me that they're so grateful because it's so human and they can so relate to it. And they so appreciate that I'm not just this perfect person or presenting myself as some perfect person, that I'm very human, and showing how this really shows up in a human life.
Well, it's a very cool looking book. And I do want to say, for anyone that wants to look at your books and purchase them, they are at mercedeskirkel.com. Is that your main website?
Yes, and they're also available through Amazon and on Kindle pretty much worldwide. And so you can find them easily on Amazon or through my website.
And I'm looking at recent posts. You have 7 signs of completing the third dimension. Tell me about this, the 7 signs.
Oh gosh, I don't even remember what those are anymore. I
All right, I'll look at it and I'll tell you.
But I do have my newsletter that I send out. I used to do it weekly, but now it's periodically. I don't do it weekly anymore. But that's a way that people can sign up for the newsletter. It's free, and it generally includes a channeled message most often from Mary Magdalene or from Yeshua these days, or from both of them. They often work together. So if you're interested.
I wanted to look at this, the 7 signs of completing the third dimension. The first one was, you stop giving your power away to outside authority.
Exactly. And that's the process we just did, where, if you look in the mirror and you think my happiness has to come from the mirror becomes your outside authority. Your image becomes your outside authority. But if you're sourcing that from within, from your inner connection to the divine, you become empowered.
The second one was, you stop thinking of life as a battle that you have to win in order to survive.
Right. And this is part of the power element of the third dimension.
You stop seeing death as having lost the fight. Goes with that too.
Right. Because as we move into the fourth dimension, we see that death is not the end. It's simply, Mary said, it's just like moving into a new room or changing your clothes, new outfit.
I like that. The third one is, you don't enjoy winning if others are losing. Cooperation and collaboration with others become more attractive than competing. Tell me about that one.
Cooperation. Collaboration, yes.
Oh, okay.
Well, this is part of that battle where it's me versus you. And you start to realize, as you begin to connect with all these inner
the lady in the comparing myself to people at the grocery store. Is
yes,
that kind
exactly. Yeah, it's me versus them. Uh-oh, they're better than me. Oh, I think I'm better than them.
Oh, we're at the end. Okay. Well, it was great having you, girl. Thank you. Bye. Hi, I'm Anne-Marie Odell at Achieve Radio's Tarot Joy. Come on upstairs. Grab yourself a tapestried pillow and get a down-home, honest read.